The guard's hand moved to his sidearm before his brain registered why. The alien queen had crossed the threshold, alone, unannounced, breaking every protocol established in 6 months of tense negotiations. Captain Rivera didn't draw. He'd seen enough first contact scenarios go wrong because someone flinched. The queen stood 3 meters inside the human observation deck, her crystalline carapace catching the station's harsh light and scattering it in patterns that made his eyes water. 4 arms hung loose at her sides, each ending in delicate manipulators that could crush steel or perform microsurgery depending on mood. Her head tilted, compound eyes fixing on the child. The child shouldn't have been there. Captain Marcus Chen's daughter, 8 years old, visiting during what was supposed to be a routine maintenance shift. She'd been drawing at the corner table when the doors opened. Now she stood frozen, crayon still gripped in one small fist, staring up at the creature that towered over her father by half a meter. "Your Majesty." Rivera kept his voice level, his body between the queen and the child without making it obvious. "The scheduled meeting isn't for another 4 hours. Ambassador Torvald isn't even on station yet." The queen's mandibles clicked, a sound their linguists still couldn't fully interpret. Aggression? Amusement? Nervousness? Her translator, a bulky device strapped across her thorax, crackled to life with a feminine voice that sounded nothing like the clicking, chirping noises she made. "I require no ambassador. I come for truth." Rivera's fingers twitched. Behind him, he heard Chen moving slowly, probably trying to reach his daughter without triggering a reaction. The queen's head swiveled, tracking the movement with predatory precision. Captain Chen. Remain. Chen froze. Rivera had served with the man for 3 years, watched him stay calm during reactor failures and hull breaches. Right now, his face had gone pale as moonlight. "Mira." Chen's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Come here, baby." The girl didn't move. She was still staring at the queen, but her expression had shifted from fear to something Rivera couldn't quite name. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition of something he couldn't see. I heard the recording. The queen took 1 step closer to the child. Rivera's hand tightened on his weapon grip, finger carefully away from the trigger. 3 days passed. The child spoke words that reached my vessel. Words that were not meant for my auditory sensors. Rivera's mind raced. 3 days ago, there'd been an open channel malfunction, brief cross-contamination between human and Jatari frequencies. He'd filed a report. Routine technical error. Nothing worth. She said we could share space. That there was room for everyone. The queen's voice, filtered through the translator, carried something that might have been wonder or might have been accusation. She said her father told her the universe was big enough for all of us to have a home. Mira finally moved, taking 1 small step forward. Rivera's heart hammered against his ribs. "Dad says you're scared like us," the girl said. Her voice was clear, steady, impossibly calm for a child facing an alien being that could end her life with 1 casual movement. "He says you lost planets too, that you're looking for somewhere safe." The queen's entire body went still, a stillness so absolute it seemed to suck motion from the air itself. Rivera had read the classified reports. The Jatari's home system, consumed by their own star's death throes 15 years ago. 4 billion dead. The survivors scattered across colony ships, searching for worlds that could support their biology, the same biology that made them excellent warriors and terrifying opponents. "Your father is indiscreet." The queen's translator couldn't mask the edge in those words. "My father tells me the truth." Mira took another step, and Rivera moved without thinking, putting himself directly in her path. The queen's head snapped toward him, all 4 arms rising slightly. "Captain." Chen's voice held a warning, but Rivera couldn't tell if it was meant for him or the queen. "Protocols exist for reasons, Your Majesty." Rivera kept his tone respectful but firm. "The child means no offense, but security requires security." The queen's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound like breaking ice. "Security is why we die in the dark between stars." "Security is why your admirals position warships at every approach vector. Security is why my people sleep in stasis because we have insufficient resources to keep everyone conscious." She lowered her arms slowly, deliberately. "Security has brought us to the edge of war over uninhabitable rocks and ice." The silence stretched. Rivera could hear the station's ventilation system, the distant hum of reactor cores, his own pulse loud in his ears. Mira ducked under his arm before he could stop her. She walked straight toward the queen, small and fragile and impossibly brave. until she stood close enough to touch. Rivera's hand found his weapon grip again, but he didn't draw. Chen made a choke sound behind him. The child reached up and placed something on the deck plating between herself and the queen. Her drawing. Rivera couldn't see details from his angle, just bright crayon colors against white paper. I drew your ship and ours, Mira said. Together. Dad showed me pictures of what your world looked like before the star got sick. It was pretty. I'm sorry it's gone. The queen bent forward, moving with shocking gentleness for something so massive, and examined the crude crayon drawing with what seemed like genuine attention. Her translator remained silent for long seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, though the mechanical filter struggled to convey it. You are a strange species. You send warriors to greet us, but you let children speak truth they cannot understand the weight of. She understands enough, Chen said quietly. He'd moved to stand beside Rivera, close enough for mutual support, but not close enough to seem threatening. She understands that everyone needs a home. That fear makes people do stupid things. That talking is harder than shooting, but usually works out better. He paused. I told her about your people because she asked. Because she saw me reviewing casualty projections and wanted to know why I looked sad. The queen straightened to her full height, and for a moment Rivera thought everything was about to go catastrophically wrong. Then she made a gesture with her upper right arm, a complex movement their cultural liaisons had tentatively identified as respectful acknowledgement. The child jokes about sharing space, as if it is simple. As if treaties and territory and resources can be dismissed with colored wax and paper. The queen's compound eyes fixed on Mira again. You do not understand what you offer. I understand we have lots of space, Mira said. Dad showed me the maps. Hundreds of systems we haven't even visited yet. Thousands of planets. We're not using most of them. Your government would not agree. Then they're being stupid. Chen closed his eyes briefly, probably contemplating his daughter's future career prospects if this went wrong. The queen's mandibles clicked again, rapid fire, and her translator emitted something that might have been laughter, or a cough, or a declaration of war. The linguistic databases still had gaps. Perhaps, the queen said, they are. She turned toward the observation window, looking out at the starfield beyond. Her reflection ghosted across the reinforced glass, alien and beautiful and strange. I came here without escort because I needed to know if the child's words were performance or belief. If this was diplomatic manipulation or genuine ignorance of how the universe operates, she gestured toward the stars with one delicate manipulator. My people are dying, Captain Rivera. Slowly. Our ships fail. Our resources dwindle. We have perhaps 10 years before we must choose between extinction and conquest. Rivera felt the weight of that statement settle over the room like a physical thing. And then a child speaks into the void about sharing, the queen continued. About room for everyone. About homes and safety and simple kindness. She looked back at Mira. Either you are the greatest manipulator your species has produced, or you are exactly what you appear to be, too young to understand that the universe does not reward such thoughts. Mira frowned, the expression so serious on her young face that Rivera almost smiled despite everything. The universe doesn't reward anything, she said. It just is. People decide what happens. That's what Dad says. The queen stood motionless for 3 full seconds. Then she reached down and picked up the crayon drawing with surprising delicacy, holding it in her lower left manipulator as if it were something precious. I will take this, she announced. I will show it to my council. They will call me mad. They will say humans cannot be trusted, that this is a trick, that we should take what we need because we are stronger. She carefully rolled the paper, protecting Mira's crude artwork. But they will see it nonetheless. They will know that one human child, at least, believes in possibilities my people abandoned generations ago. She moved toward the door, and Rivera stepped aside, still tense, still ready for anything. The queen paused at the threshold, looking back. In 4 hours, I will attend the scheduled meeting. Ambassador Torvald will make his proposals. I will counter with demands. We will achieve nothing, because we are both bound by fear and protocol and the weight of our people's expectations. Her compound eyes seemed to focus on all 3 humans simultaneously. But I will remember that, before all that theater, I met a child who thought sharing space was obvious, who drew pictures instead of battle plans, who made me remember that my people too were once capable of simple hope. She left as silently as she'd arrived, the door hissing shut behind her crystalline form. Rivera's legs felt weak. He holstered his weapon with shaking hands and turned to find Chen had scooped Mira into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. That, Rivera said carefully, "is going in my report." "I'll get court-martialed," Chen muttered into his daughter's hair. "Bringing a civilian child into a first contact situation, security breach, protocol violations, you'll get a commendation." Rivera moved to the observation window, watching the Queen's shuttle detach from the station. That's the first real conversation anyone's had with the Jatari leadership in 6 months. The first time she's come to us instead of making us go to her. The first time she's admitted vulnerability or talked about anything besides territorial rights and resource allocation. He turned back to Chen and Mira. The girl had her head on her father's shoulder, looking tired now that the adrenaline was fading. "What happens now?" Chen asked. Rivera watched the shuttle accelerate toward the massive Jatari colony ship hanging in the distance like a cathedral built of metal and desperation. Somewhere aboard that vessel, a warrior queen was carrying a child's drawing to her war council. Somewhere in the chain of command above his pay grade, admirals were probably losing their minds over unauthorized contact and broken protocols. Now? Rivera pulled up his comlink, already composing the message that would set everything in motion. Now we find out if the universe rewards hope or just punishes it. Either way, we've got 4 hours to figure out how to turn a crayon drawing into a treaty that saves 2 species from eating each other alive. He looked at Mira, who met his gaze with those serious, steady eyes. "Good job, kid. You just did what 6 months of professional diplomacy couldn't. You made her curious, instead of afraid." He smiled, though it felt fragile on his face. "Let's hope that's enough." Chen carried his daughter toward the door, already talking softly to her about what had just happened, about bravery and risk, and how some rules existed to be broken by people brave enough to see past them. Rivera stayed at the window, watching the stars and thinking about sharing space, about rooms big enough for everyone, about children who saw solutions where adults saw only problems. 4 hours until the meeting. 4 hours to turn a moment of honest connection into something that might actually matter. 4 hours to prove that sometimes the universe did reward the brave and the foolish in equal measure. The shuttle disappeared against the black, and Rivera got to work. The ambassador arrived with an entourage of 12 and a briefcase full of carefully worded compromises that satisfied no one. Torvald was Career Diplomatic Corps, silver-haired and silver-tongued, a man who'd negotiated everything from mining rights to planetary boundaries without ever raising his voice or breaking protocol. He listened to Rivera's report with his face carefully neutral, occasionally making notes on his tablet, betraying nothing. "A child," he said when Rivera finished. "An 8-year-old girl with crayons accomplished what my entire team couldn't in 6 months. She changed the context," Rivera replied, "made it personal instead of political. Personal is dangerous in negotiations. Personal means emotion, and emotion means mistakes." Torvald stood, adjusting his jacket with practiced precision, but it also means opportunity.
"The Queen came alone."
"That's significant. She broke her own protocols because she wanted to understand something, which means she's looking for alternatives to the path her war council is pushing." "What path is that?" Torvald met Rivera's eyes. "Invasion, conquest. They've identified 17 colony worlds with minimal defense capacity. They could take them all within a year if they committed their full military capability. Our model suggests we'd lose 500 million people before we could mount an effective response." The number hit Rivera like a physical blow. Then why haven't they? Because the Queen doesn't want to be remembered as a conqueror. Because some part of her still believes in the civilization her people built before their star died. Because, Torvald gestured toward Rivera's report, she wanted to believe a child's drawing might mean something real. He gathered his materials, preparing for the meeting that would determine whether humanity and the Zatari found a way to coexist or plunged into a war neither side could afford. "I need you in the room," Torvald said. "You and Captain Chen. The Queen met you first. She'll expect to see familiar faces. Chen's daughter is with station security under guard, comfortable and safe. The Queen won't harm her. Whatever else the Jatari are, they don't make war on children." Torvald paused at the door. "At least not intentionally. War has a way of killing everyone, regardless of intention." The conference room was stark and functional, designed for utility rather than comfort. Human and Jatari delegations sat across from each other at a table that had been specially constructed to accommodate different body types and cultural expectations. The Queen sat at the center of her delegation, flanked by what Rivera assumed were military advisors based on the scars marking their carapaces and the weapons they openly carried. Mira's drawing sat on the table in front of the Queen, carefully flattened and protected under a clear preservation sheet. Torvald opened with standard diplomatic pleasantries, acknowledging the Queen's presence and expressing humanity's continued commitment to peaceful coexistence. The Queen listened without visible reaction, her translator rendering Torvald's words into her language with mechanical precision. When he finished, she spoke without preamble. Your words are beautiful and meaningless. You speak of commitment to peace while your warships monitor our every movement. You speak of coexistence while your government refuses to grant us settlement rights on worlds you do not even occupy. Her mandibles clicked with what Rivera had learned to recognize as frustration. We are dying, Ambassador. My people need worlds, resources, space to expand before our ships fail and condemn billions to slow death in the void. Your beautiful words do nothing to address this reality. We have offered, Torvald began. You have offered monitoring agreements and provisional access to systems so marginal they barely qualify as habitable. You have offered conditional friendship that requires we accept permanent subordination to human oversight and control. The Queen's forearms moved in what might have been a gesture of dismissal. These are not offers. They are demands for surrender disguised as negotiation. The Jetari advisors clicked in what sounded like agreement. The human delegation shifted uncomfortably. Rivera saw the path this was taking. The same circular argument that had dominated every previous session, both sides entrenched in positions that made war increasingly inevitable. Then Chen spoke. You're right. Every head turned toward him. Torvald's expression suggested he was contemplating whether to have Chen removed or promoted. Chen stood slowly, his hands visible and empty, his posture relaxed. You're absolutely right, Your Majesty. We'd been negotiating from fear instead of from truth. We've been protecting territory we barely use because we're terrified of what happens if we show weakness. We've been treating you as a threat to be contained instead of as people who need help. The Queen's compound eyes fixed on him with predatory intensity. Continue, she said softly. My daughter drew a picture because she doesn't know all the political complications and historical precedents and strategic considerations that make adults think peace is impossible. She just knows that empty space sitting unused while people die is stupid. Chen's voice was steady, conversational, the tone of a man speaking truth regardless of consequences. And she's right. It is stupid. We have hundreds of surveyed systems we're not colonizing. We have resources we're stockpiling against theoretical future needs while your people starve now. We have room, and we're refusing to share it because we're afraid. Afraid of what? The Queen leaned forward slightly. Afraid you'll take everything. Afraid we'll lose control. Afraid of change and difference in sharing power with beings we don't fully understand. Chen glanced at Torvald, who had gone very still. Afraid to admit that maybe the universe really is big enough for everyone, and that holding on too tight to what we have might cost us more than sharing ever would. Silence filled the room, like water filling a sinking ship. One of the Jotari advisors, a scarred veteran with 3 intact arms, spoke for the first time, their translator rendering harsh clicking into crisp words. Humans speak of sharing when they possess it. Easy to be generous from position of strength. Where was this generosity when we first made contact? When we were desperate and you were suspicious? Absent, Chen admitted. We failed you. We let fear dictate policy when we should have led with compassion. We saw potential enemies instead of desperate refugees. We prioritized security over decency. He looked directly at the Queen. We were wrong. And we can continue being wrong until this turns into a war that kills millions on both sides, or we can try something different. Different how? The Queen's voice carried something that might have been genuine curiosity. Chen pulled out his own tablet, calling up data he'd compiled during the 4 hours between encounters. We have 47 systems that meet Jatari biological requirements. Surveyed, cataloged, and completely empty. We're not using them because they're too far from our current expansion radius, or because the initial resource assessments weren't promising enough, or because they're just sitting on a list waiting for future generations to eventually need them. He turned the tablet toward the Queen. What if we offered them? Not as conditional agreements with monitoring requirements, but as sovereign territory for your people to settle and develop as you see fit? The human delegation erupted in whispered objections. Torvald raised one hand for silence but didn't contradict Chen's proposal. The Queen studied the data with all the focus of a predator evaluating prey. Her advisors leaned close, clicking rapidly in conversation too fast for the translators to render clearly. 47 systems, she said finally. For what price? What do you demand in return? Peace, Chen said simply. Genuine alliance instead of armed coexistence. Shared defense, open borders between human and Jatari territory, cultural and scientific exchange, mutual aid agreements. He paused. Druth, about your military capacity, your population, your real needs. No more posturing, no more strategic ambiguity. If we're going to share space, we need to trust each other. Trust is earned, not negotiated. Then let's earn it, together. Starting now. The scarred advisor spoke again, voice sharp with suspicion. This is a trap. Humans do not surrender territory without cause. They seek to divide our people, isolate colony groups from the main fleet, create dependencies that... It's not a trap. Mira's voice cut through the debate like a blade through water. Rivera spun toward the door where the child stood between two very embarrassed-looking security officers. She'd apparently escaped her guard and found her way to the conference room through sheer determination and knowledge of the station's service corridors. Chen's face cycled through alarm, pride, and resignation in quick succession. Miss Chen, Torvald said carefully, this is a secured... I wanted to make sure the Queen got my drawing. Mira walked into the room as if she belonged there, completely unfazed by the collection of armed aliens and tense humans. And I wanted to tell her something. The Queen tilted her head, mandibles moving in that clicking pattern Rivera had tentatively identified as amusement. Speak, small human. You have already altered the course of this negotiation more than you know. Mira walked right up to the table, looking up at the towering alien with absolute confidence. My dad's not lying. None of them are. They're just scared like you are. But being scared is okay as long as you don't let it make you mean. She pointed at the preserved drawing. I drew your ship and ours together because that's what should happen. You need homes and we have extras. Sharing is what you do when someone needs help and you can give it. Sharing requires trust, the Queen said gently. How do I trust beings I barely understand? You start. Mira said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Someone has to go first, or everyone just stays scared forever. That's what my mom says. She died when I was little, but she told me that being brave means trusting people even when you're not sure, because if nobody trusts anybody, nothing good ever happens. The conference room had gone absolutely silent. Rivera saw tears on Chen's face, quickly wiped away. The Queen reached down with one delicate manipulator and gently touched the top of Mira's head, a gesture so careful, so obviously restrained, that it took Rivera's breath away. Your mother was wise. You honor her memory. The Queen straightened, looking across the table at the human delegation. Very well, we will start. I will trust, and we will see if your species deserves this faith. She gestured to one of her advisors, who produced a small data crystal. Complete military assessment of Jatari forces. Ship counts, weapons capacity, strategic deployments, everything your analysts have been attempting to estimate for the past year. I give you this freely, trusting you will not use it to plan our destruction. She placed the crystal on the table, and Rivera felt the weight of what was happening settle over him. This was the moment, the hinge point where everything could go right or catastrophically wrong. Torvald picked up the crystal, held it for a moment, then turned to his own aide. Get me the complete Colonial Development Archive. Every survey, every resource assessment, every strategic consideration for the 47 systems Captain Chen identified, plus another 30 we've been holding in reserve. He looked at the Queen. And our military deployments in this sector. Full transparency. If we're trusting each other, we do it completely or not at all. The Queen's mandibles clicked in what Rivera was now certain was approval. Your people are strange, she said to Mira, but she was looking at all the humans. You speak through children. You break your own protocols. You offer what others would protect. You are inefficient and illogical and utterly unpredictable. She lifted the preserved drawing, holding it up to catch the light. And perhaps that is why you might succeed where more logical species would fail. Logic says we should fight over scarce resources. Logic says trust is weakness. Logic says security requires control. She carefully set the drawing down, treating it like a sacred text. But a child with crayons says there is room for everyone. And I find I want to live in a universe where she is right and logic is wrong. The next 3 hours transformed into something Rivera had never witnessed in any diplomatic session. Real negotiation, not the careful verbal dancing that usually passed for it. The Zatari opened their data about population distribution, life support limitations, the failing systems that made their colony ships increasingly precarious. the humans countered with detailed resource assessments, infrastructure support they could provide, technology sharing that would help the Jatari establish permanent settlements faster. Mira sat in a chair someone had conjured for her, watching the adults work with the satisfied expression of someone who'd fixed something broken and was watching it work properly for the first time. Torvald proved why he'd built his reputation. He took Chen's impulsive offer and shaped it into an actual framework, identifying points of mutual benefit, creating oversight structures that protected both species without infantilizing the Jotari. The Queen matched him point for point, suggesting modifications that addressed legitimate human concerns about security while maintaining Jotari sovereignty. By the time the session ended, they had the skeleton of an actual agreement. Not perfect, not final, but real. 47 systems designated for Jotari settlement, with human infrastructure support during the establishment phase, technology exchange programs, joint scientific initiatives, a mutual defense pact that would commit both species to protecting each other against external threats, and most importantly, a truth commission, delegations from both sides that would meet regularly, share information freely, and work through problems before they escalated into conflicts. The Queen stood as the session concluded, her delegation rising with her. She looked tired, Rivera thought. Or perhaps it was just the weight of hope, which could be heavier than despair. "We will present this to our councils," she said.
"They will object. They will call me naive and manipulated."
"They will say humans cannot be trusted." She glanced at Mira. "But I will show them this drawing, and I will tell them about a child who believed in sharing space. And I will argue that if we destroy beings capable of producing such children, we destroy something precious that the universe can ill afford to lose." She moved toward the exit, then paused. "Captain Chen, your daughter is remarkable. Guard her well. The universe needs more who see possibilities instead of limitations."
Thank you, Your Majesty.
Chen's voice was rough with emotion.
And thank you for trusting us.
"For taking the first step. We shall see if it leads somewhere worth walking." The Queen's translator struggled with what might have been a sigh, but at least we walk forward instead of in circles. After the Zaytari delegation departed, the room erupted in controlled chaos. Aides rushed to compile the agreements. Communications specialists began crafting announcements. Security teams started updating protocols for the increased contact that would follow. Torvald approached Chen and Rivera, with Mira still clutched in her father's arms. "That," the ambassador said quietly, "was the most terrifying and exhilarating negotiation of my career. What you did was reckless, protocol-violating, and absolutely brilliant." He looked at Mira. "And you, young lady, just changed the course of human history. How does that feel?" Mira yawned, exhausted from the day's events. "Tired." "Can we go home now?" The adults laughed, tension breaking like a fever. "Yes," Chen said. "We can go home." Rivera watched them leave, father and daughter walking together through corridors that felt different now, charged with possibility instead of dread. He returned to his post, checking security feeds and updating logs, performing the mundane tasks that kept a space station functioning. But he kept glancing at the starfield beyond the observation windows, where Jatari ships and human vessels hung in space that was slowly becoming shared instead of divided. Somewhere out there, the Queen was showing a crayon drawing to her war council, making the case for peace to beings who'd spent years preparing for conquest. Somewhere humans and Jatari were about to begin the hard work of actually trusting each other, of building something new from the ruins of mutual fear. And it had all started because a child thought sharing space was obvious, and because a warrior queen had been brave enough to believe her. 3 months later, Rivera stood on the observation deck again, watching the first Jatari colony ship prepare to depart for their new system. 17,000 colonists heading for a world humans had surveyed and dismissed as marginally habitable, but which perfectly suited Jatari biological requirements. Human engineering teams had gone ahead, building the initial infrastructure that would give the colonists a stable foundation to build upon. Chen joined him at the window, without Mira this time. The girl was at school, learning alongside the first Jatari children to receive human education, part of the exchange program that now saw young from both species sharing knowledge and, more importantly, sharing space in ways that made the idea of future conflict increasingly absurd. "The Queen sent something for Mira," Chen said, holding up a small package. "Delivered through official channels, complete with diplomatic seals." "What is it?" Chen opened the package carefully. Inside was a crystal sculpture, intricate and beautiful, shaped like 2 ships orbiting a shared sun. Human and Juratari vessels, forever bound in mutual orbit, neither dominating, both necessary to maintain the balance. And beneath it, a note in carefully rendered human script. For the child who taught a queen to hope, may she never lose the wisdom to see what adults have forgotten. Rivera smiled. 3 months ago, they'd been on the edge of war. Now they were writing each other poetry and sending gifts. Now they were sharing star charts and dinner recipes and the mundane details of life that turned strangers into neighbors and neighbors into friends. Think it'll last? Chen asked quietly. Rivera watched the colony ship's engines flare to life, beginning the journey to a new home. I think we've got a better chance than we had. 'Cause we started with truth instead of strategy. Because a child drew a picture, and a queen was brave enough to believe it might mean something. The ship accelerated, leaving trails of light against the black, and because, Rivera added, the universe turned out to be exactly what Mira said it was, big enough for everyone who's willing to share it. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching possibilities unfold across the starfield, watching the future take shape, one brave choice at a time. Somewhere children of two species were learning each other's languages and playing games that mixed human and Jetari rules. Somewhere engineers were solving problems together that neither species could have addressed alone. Somewhere, the slow work of building actual peace was happening in 10,000 small moments that would never make official reports, but would matter more than any treaty. And in a diplomatic archive, carefully preserved and protected, a crayon drawing sat as a reminder that sometimes the most important truths come from the mouths of those too young to know they're supposed to be impossible. Rivera returned to his duties, securing a station that now served as a bridge between species. Chen went back to his daughter, carrying a gift from an alien queen who'd learned to hope from a child's simple certainty. And high above them all, the stars shone on ships from two worlds sharing the same space, proving that the universe was indeed big enough for everyone willing to see it.